What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Fantasy Football Over Analysis. Today we're talking about the Chicago Bears, their fantasy relevant players, and whether or not we are targeting or fading them in our drafts this summer. At quarterback, Caleb Williams took a big step forward in his second season in the league, finishing as the QB5 in fantasy. Williams really benefited from the presence of Ben Johnson and playing in one of the league's most dynamic offenses. And Williams just made so many improvements across the board, one of the biggest being his ability to avoid sacks. Caleb goes from taking 68 sacks as a rookie to only taking 24 last season. And you just saw Williams overall look so much more comfortable in the NFL in his second season. And I really can't understate just how important it was for Williams in his development to have a creative, dynamic offensive mind like Ben Johnson as his head coach and play caller for year two, rather than what he was dealing with year one, with just a complete failure of a head coach in Matt Eberflus. The Ben Johnson hire was just the biggest win that the Chicago Bears organization have had in maybe the last 20 years. And just think about how far Caleb Williams has come in the last year. After year one, there were so many questions about his attitude, his demeanor, whether or not he would buy into the system. And think about a year ago, if someone had asked you, would you rather start your franchise with Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams as your young quarterback? Going into last season, the majority of people would have said Jaden Daniels without a second thought. Now fast forward to how things have played out a year later, and while I don't think it would be completely one-sided in favor of Caleb Williams, it's now 100% much more of a debate than it was a year ago. And the thing with Williams last season was, as good as he was and as improved as his game was, he still left a lot of meat on the bone. There's a lot that he can still develop on and continue to get better at within this offense. Really, Williams' passing numbers ended up being pretty modest from last year. He finishes with just under 4,000 yards and only 27 touchdowns. And even with rushing, there's still a ceiling here that Williams can reach. As much as he used his legs to make plays and get himself out of trouble last season, his rushing totals still aren't that eye-popping. He had a little under 400 rushing yards and only 3 rushing touchdowns. So imagine if he were to spike in that department, similar to what Trevor Lawrence did last season when Lawrence rushed for 9 scores. If Williams has a spike in rushing touchdowns, that right there is a path to him reaching a higher ceiling. And through the passing game as well, there's still a higher plateau that Williams can reach here. With this offense and these skill position guys that he's got to work with, and Williams' own God-given talent, there's no reason that he couldn't hit the 4,000 yard mark and 30 plus touchdowns, maybe even a 35 or 40 touchdown season is within his range of outcomes. So when you look at all these factors, and you also look at where Williams is currently going in drafts right now, currently coming in as the QB8, I think that's such a phenomenal value for a guy that has multiple paths to a higher ceiling, and I think Williams could well be the QB1 overall. So I think with Williams, again, he's being underpriced right now. He's going below what his floor is, which I believe is a top 5 quarterback. And if he hits that ceiling, then that's a league-winning pick. And you can draft Williams in the 6th, 7th, 8th round. So as much as I like waiting on quarterback in a lot of builds, I'm also completely fine with taking Williams at his cost. At running back, DeAndre Swift finished as the RB15. And with Swift, you know that he's going to be one of the safest picks in fantasy that you can make. He's dependably going to finish as an RB2. Swift has literally been an RB2 for every year of his NFL career. He's a good fit for the Chicago offense. Ben Johnson knows how to utilize him from their history together in Detroit. You can also count on him to chip in 35 to 40 receptions a season to give you some floor out of the receiving game. The problem with Swift is, you know you're drafting a guy that has a capped ceiling. And a lot of times with guys, you can make the case that if they run hot with touchdowns, they're going to outperform their ADP. That's not really the case with Swift. Last season, Swift still scores double-digit touchdowns, finishing with 10, and RB15 was the best finish that he's ever had in his fantasy career. So I'm completely fine if you want to draft Swift as your RB2. If you miss out on some of the better RB targets in round 3, round 4, then Swift is there for you in round 5 or 6. He's going to give you the safe floor of around 15-ish points per week, but just don't expect him to be a league winner for you. And then in this backfield, you also have Kyle Monangai. Monangai, a 7th round pick who last year had a handful of really nice games for the Bears. And while I like Monangai, I do feel that he's a little overpriced for what he is. Coming in at the RB36 right now, For Monangai to really return value for you, you're going to need a swift injury at some point that keeps him out multiple weeks. Otherwise, it's going to be very tough to know when Monangai is going to get the goal line carries on a given week. His spiked weeks are going to be so hard to project when Swift is healthy. You're just never going to feel good about starting him, even as a flex play. Rather than Monangai, I'd rather be drafting Jonathan Brooks at RB39 or Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt at RB40. I'd even rather wait a couple more rounds later and take Keaton Mitchell as the RB51 before I draft Monangai. At wide receiver, one of the big moves the Bears made over the offseason was getting rid of DJ Moore. This frees up both Luther Burden and Rome Odunze to take on bigger roles. And for Luther Burden, right now coming in as the wide receiver 23, I absolutely love him for fantasy this year. And Burden really didn't do a lot in his rookie season. Johnson brought both him and Colston Loveland along slowly. But once Burden was finally given an expanded role toward the end of the year, he really started to flash. And then this offseason, he's earned nothing but praise from both Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams. Ben Johnson saying that he's really happy with Burden's offseason and that he's buying Luther Burden stock right now. Caleb Williams himself saying that Burden, quote-unquote, catches everything and he's a very friendly receiver. These are all great things that we want to hear for a second-year wide receiver. So coming in at the wide receiver 23 right now, I think that's a great price point for Burden. It's not too expensive for me. I love getting him in the 4th round. Ever since Burden was drafted, the thought was that he could be Ben Johnson's Amon-Ra St. Brown. And if that's the case, to get that level of a player in round 4, again, we're talking about somebody that has potential league-winning upside. And then we have Rome Odunze, and Rome last year starts out with a phenomenal month of September, and then just completely falls off the rest of the way. From week 6 on, Rome only had 2 games where he had above 10 fantasy points, so really after the first 4 weeks of the year, he was just completely unstartable. And I think there's a couple reasons for the fall off. For one, I think there were times last year where Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze were not completely in sync with each other. Either Caleb would be late getting him the ball or overshoot him, or there would just be times where Odunze just wouldn't make the play and would drop the pass. There were even some times when the two would connect and it would just get wiped out by a penalty. So even though the stats just completely fell off after September, I do think that Odunze was really inches away from having at least a couple more usable stat lines last year. There also was the foot injury that Odunze suffered that severely limited him down the stretch and even caused him to miss the final 5 games of the season. So with Rome, I think he's one of the riskiest members of this Bears offense, but he's not a total fade for me. We can't forget what he was able to do that last September. We also can't forget that he was very close to having some bigger stat lines throughout the season. Also, Odunze is still a former first-round pick, entering his 3rd year, 2nd year in the Ben Johnson system, and with DJ Moore gone as well, it's still going to make things easier for Odunze to find his way to more targets and a larger role. The foot injury, however, is not going away. We have all heard the comments that he's made over the offseason about how this is his new normal. You just hope that it's something that he's learned to tolerate much better than what he was able to do last season, and it won't limit him too much going into this season. Odunze right now being drafted as the wide receiver 29, I think that's a fair price tag for him. I don't necessarily go out of my way to get him, but if I'm betting on Caleb Williams taking another step forward and producing more as a passer this year, and I'm betting on Odunze himself also improving and being a part of that, then I think there's a good chance that Odunze will outperform that wide receiver 29. And then at tight end, Colston Loveland is another player that we're excited about for this season. Loveland and Caleb Williams both showed really nice chemistry with each other down the stretch last season. And going into year 2, there's every indication in the world that he's going to be a featured part of this offense. And I think that if Caleb Williams' touchdown numbers do spike in year 3, that Colston Loveland is going to have a huge part in that. So I'm completely fine with taking Colston Loveland in round 3. I'm good paying a premium for him. I actually think that there's a good chance he finishes above Trey McBride in scoring this year. And that's going to do it for this one, guys. So with the Bears, this is one of my favorite teams to target for fantasy football. I love both the floor and the ceiling for Caleb Williams. I think he has QB1 overall within his range of outcomes. DeAndre Swift, I think, is a very safe RB2. Luther Burden, Colston Loveland, sky is the limit for both of these guys. I love taking them in rounds 3 and round 4. And Rome Odunze, even though I think he's the riskiest of the Bears skill position guys, he's not without upside of his own. But I thank you guys so much for watching, and we will talk to you next time when we go over the Detroit Lions.